Pikachu is ready for bed, bonnet and all. Are you? Of course you are. That's why you're here. Tonight we're keeping it simple and we're just going to go through the true scary stories thread on Reddit and read some good spooky stories. As always, before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. And if you have your own Reddit-like story that you would like to share with me to read in a future video, make sure to email this email right here, which is also available in the description down below. It does not have to be your own story, just make sure you let me know the details. I want to make that video really soon, but I think a part of me is waiting until I have enough stories for it to be a super long video, like 40 minutes long. Right now it's giving 20 minutes, so send me emails. Let's fix that. Lastly, if you're loving the content and you want to show some support and tip your favorite waitress, or should I say sleeptress, here's how you can do that. This right here is my tip jar information and Cash App. And this, like the email, is also available down below. Anything is greatly appreciated. Love you guys, okay? That's enough from me. Let's get into these scary stories. The first story says, the following is a story that took place quite a few years back now. However, it still baffles me completely, and I'd like to share it here. I'm a teenager, and I've been scouting or in the Boy Scouts for nearly all my life, and I really enjoy exploring with my friends and being trusted more as I'm older now. A few years ago, me and two girls named Amy and Harriet were asked to head into the woods surrounding our campsite to find a long, straight stick suitable for carving into a point. Bear in mind that I was a lot younger back then. Harriet was older and Amy only 1 year older than myself. We had been walking in deliberately the same direction as to not get lost and memorizing the surroundings as we went in order to find our way back easily. About 15 minutes in, we couldn't find anything to take back, so we turned around to return to the campsite. That's when the initial panic set in. The trees had almost unnaturally knitted themselves together in such a way that it seemed our path was non-existent in the first place. It had just vanished. We looked around 360 degrees, and now everything looked exactly the same. Trees we could have sworn were different from one another appeared as all copies of the same tree. We kept walking in what we thought to be the correct direction, whilst shouting out for help, and eventually came to a concrete path almost like a road, but very thin, separating the forest, splitting it into two. We didn't follow the road as it went in the wrong direction of our camp. On the other side of the path was more forest. However, nearby was an abandoned shack, likely used for storage or whatever else. We had no idea anything like this was out here in these woods, so we just kept walking. We eventually came to a road we didn't recognize. A woman wearing a pink and purple regatta outdoors coat walked past, and we frantically asked her for the direction of our campsite, as by now, according to our watches and Harriet's phone, we'd been walking for an hour and a half. She said she'd never seen us before, but she said there's another campsite in that direction. We followed her advice and eventually came back to our campsite. We frantically apologized for being so long and that we couldn't find anything. The leader, Ian, could see all three of us were shaken up, and he stated, confused, that we'd only been gone 25 minutes and that our free time was still going on. To this day, this baffles all three of us, as our free time was 40 minutes long and our watches and phones had said we'd been gone for hours. The forest we were lost in felt crushing and claustrophobic, like we'd tracks or something, and that hours in the forest were only minutes in the rest of the world. The feeling was very strange, and it stuck with me for the rest of the camp. It's funny how good times fly by at light speed, but scary times feel like they last forever. The next story says, I'm a behavioral health technician. I got a new job back in September at what's considered a luxury drug and alcohol rehab facility. The facility is a huge mansion that on the outside looks like a mix of the Banks Bel Air mansion on Fresh Prince or a mini White House. It has 3 levels, 13 rooms that all have private bathrooms with jacuzzi tubs. There's a gym, 3 living rooms with a huge commercial kitchen, a ballroom, yoga studio, doctor's office, huge garden, and an elevator. My first week I had 2 clients tell me it's haunted, and I laughed it off. My schedule is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. So, majority of the time all the clients are asleep, and it's just me and a nurse in this huge house. So it's quiet. My office is on the 2nd floor, nurse's office along with the kitchen and a huge pantry are on the 1st floor, and the pantry is locked at all times and the nurse has the key. A couple weeks ago, the nurse came stomping up the stairs yelling at me saying I scared her hiding in the pantry. I'm lost because I hadn't left my office. And when I tell her that, she goes pale and she's like, you weren't just in the pantry and yelled, knock knock. I say no. How could I be when you have the key? She walks out. 10 minutes later, I hear her talking, so I go down to her office and she's down on her knees praying in Punjabi. At 6 a.m., the chef and handyman clock in and ask how her night was, and I jokingly say Casper scared Nurse J in the pantry. The chef says, ooh, that's gay. If it was in the pantry. I'm like, what the fuck? He then goes on to say he's worked here for 15 years and it used to be a retirement home, so lots of residents passed away here. He named off certain residents and where their ghosts have been seen, saying they've been kind, not malicious type of hauntings. Nurse J put in her 2 weeks notice and is no longer here. I hear footsteps, light flicker, and fireplaces randomly come on, but I haven't had anything actually speak to me like Nurse J though. My pay is significantly higher than average, and my supervisor says it's because he can't keep night shift staffed. I think it's because it's haunted and my pay is too good to scare me away. I love a playful ghost story. The next story says, my 83-year-old grandma had told this story for years. So she grew up in Southwest Virginia in a small, very rural area. Her dad wasn't someone that would have been scared of a lot either. He worked at a flour mill and would walk home at night after he got off work. Her mom would usually lock the door before he came home, and she would unlock it for him when he got there. One night she said he came home, and instead of waiting for her to unlock the door, he busted the door open and came in before anyone unlocked it. She said as long as he lived, he never would tell anyone what he saw to make him bust it open. Grandpa, what freaky shit did you see? The next story says, one of the creepiest stories I know personally is from my best friend when he was at home at his house babysitting a friend's kid. Yeah, why was that sentence so hard for my brain to read? The kid, whose name was Junior, was roughly 4 to 5, I want to say. His dad was a courier, so would often be doing deliveries late at night. David, my best friend, was a teen by this point, so being home without an adult was no great task. It's important to mention that his father was a pretty paranoid individual who bought into a lot of fear-mongering in the world, so he had cameras set up all over the place. I want to say this happened in 2014. Anyway, house's living room was directly connected to the kitchen, and if you were standing in the kitchen entryway, you could see the door leading outside. It's one of those screened-in sitting areas. Junior claimed that David's mother was right there in the doorway. Really strange considering David's mother had passed away about 8 months prior. David was chilled by the remark, but the skeptic in him knew it was likely just Junior's overly active imagination, so he agreed to go and check with him. He brought a kitchen knife, if I'm remembering the story correctly. He walked with Junior down the hallway into the kitchen, where the door was open. The door being open was pretty normal. It was a hot summer day, and the house was trapping in a lot of heat. David stepped out onto the screen sitting area and looked left down the ramp his mother used to use to get outside. Nothing. He looked to the right, seeing the length of the yard. Nothing. Junior was insistent that there was someone there, which is strange considering usually in situations like these, kids tend to feel better after you poke around for them. David couldn't calm him down. Junior was certain. He kept saying, "I saw your mom, she was there." So David bargained with him. "Everything's recorded on the cameras, so we'll just look on them, and we'll know for certain whether someone was there or not." So they sifted through the cameras, and David looked for a timestamp around when Junior claimed that this woman, his deceased mother, had shown up. He stared down all the cameras as the timer ticked on, and nothing showed up. But suddenly, he watched as the camera showed a figure enter his backyard from the front by pulling the latch. An old woman, at least in her mid-60s, confidently walked into their backyard. She had a cloth grocery bag in her hand. She headed up the ramp and stood in their I'm shook. She headed up the ramp and stood in their screened sitting area for a few moments. She then reached for the door to the kitchen, cracking it open, and then brazenly stepped inside. After some time, Junior saw her in the kitchen and headed to David to tell him. Based on the camera's timestamps, she stood in the kitchen for about 10 minutes. The absolutely insane part is, she left as David went to investigate with Junior. The camera footage showed him looking around, and her leaving as he looked around. When he looked left down at the ramp where she had come up, she had already wrapped around and actually took the long way through the length of the yard. When he looked right, he quite literally just missed her. It was genuinely a matter of maybe half a second. Someone wandered right into his backyard and right into his kitchen, then stood there for 10 minutes in his kitchen doing God knows what. Nothing was stolen. Nobody was harmed or anything. Well, anyway, the night went on and nothing came of it. Me personally, I would have phoned the police, but David wouldn't. I think there's a chance that his dad may have had some guns that were acquired through perhaps some non-reputable methods. Don't do that, children. They were locked away from everyone, whatever small comfort that is. So David's instinct was that his dad would likely be furious about the police being called. Well, anyway, some time's passed. Days, weeks, who knows? I'm not sure how this information came about, but somehow David was told by either a family member or a staff member that the old woman that wandered into the house had dementia and had an episode and just sort of found herself there by a string of coincidences. That makes me so sad. The next story says, "So I saw other stories and I felt I might share mine. So I lived in Austin, Texas for most of my childhood, and I had a friend, let's just call him John. So one day, my mom decided to leave me home alone, and me being a teenager, I invited John over to play Xbox with me. About 30 minutes into our meetup, we hear a crack. That sounds like it came from upstairs. We thought it was one of my cats. I have two, so we didn't pay much attention to it. 3 hours into our meetup, my power cuts off. My friend says he's gotta leave and his mom wants him back, and after about 5 minutes he left. watching TV and decide to hit the hay. I wake up at about 2:30 in the morning to what sounds like a muffled scream, and that makes me fucking freeze up. I wait for any other sign of noise and make sure enough I wait for another sign of noise and sure enough I hear the back door open. My dumbass forgot to lock it. And this was fucking horrific. See, I'm a pretty big guy, but I was scared shitless. I grab a hammer from my nightstand that I was using a couple days before, so I could hammer nails into my wall, so I could hang some art. But I hear what sounds like a heavy-ass footstep, getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. I get into my closet and dial 911. I basically told them that there was somebody in my house, and that I was in the closet, and to get there as quickly as they fucking could. About 5 minutes pass and I hear him coming up the stairs, and he stops right by my door. I left the fucking Xbox on in my room. I hear him step into the room, and then I hear him freeze. And after about 5 seconds, he runs. I hear sirens, and I mumble, "Thank you fucking God. Thank you fucking God, man." I hear him close the door, and I look out the window to see the cop parked. And I notice the cop running into my backyard. They saw him. I decide to go downstairs on my porch, and I see the man. He's pale as fuck, probably whiter than a cloud. He's skinny as hell too, and the weirdest fucking thing though, this guy didn't have any lips. I was shocked, but if you thought that was weird, well, they got him into cuffs and into the cop car, and then he vomits fucking blood onto the goddamn window. They drove off. About a minute later, I later find out he died of a drug overdose that night. Oh, Jesus. Turns out he was high on meth. Well, that's my creepy little rant of an experience I had as a teen. What was the muffled scream then? I have questions. The next story. I was 13 when this happened, and it still gives me nightmares thinking about it. My parents wanted to go out on a date, so they left me home on a Friday night. I am an only child, so I stayed home alone a lot. We had a one-story house with a daylight basement that had its own entrance. We live on a dead-end street that is pretty quiet in the evening, so not many cars come and go. My neighbors are pretty close to my house too, so I didn't feel uncomfortable about being home by myself. So my parents left around 6 p.m. for their dinner reservation, and I had a nice hot pizza delivered and was ready to watch some scary movies all by myself. Sounds like me. I was excited. I locked the door behind them and popped on the TV. Boop. And I was scrolling through the movies on the Roku app and decided to watch one of the first Halloween movies. I snuggled in my nice, warm, fuzzy blanket on the couch, got comfy, and began my night alone. About an hour passed and I got up to use the bathroom. While in the bathroom, I thought I heard noises coming from the basement. It sounded like something was moving around, but I figured I was home alone. What could it be? So I brushed it off as nothing. I finished in the bathroom and went back to the couch to finish the movie. Another 5 minutes passed, and again, moving noises in the basement. Now I started to get nervous. A nervous feeling wrenched around my gut. I stopped the movie to listen for more noises. Oh crap, what is that? I thought about the entrance door down there and wondered if it was locked. I assumed my parents locked it. Oh, I hope they did. I didn't know what to do. I took a few deep breaths. I decided to walk towards the basement and put my ear to the door. What a mistake. I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I froze in fear. This has never happened to me before. I've been home alone in the past, but mostly during the day. I know the obvious thing to do would be to call the cops, but did I do that? No. I ran outside and went to my neighbor's house and banged on their door. Thankfully, they were home and let me in. I was out of breath, scared, and couldn't get the words out fast enough. I asked them to call the cops. neighbors check out the house, and I stayed at my neighbor's house where I felt safe. After some time, one of the cops came over to my neighbor's house and said they didn't find anyone in the house, but did say that whomever it was came in through the basement entrance. It must have been unlocked. Nothing was taken and everything was in place. My parents got home and of course they were very upset and scared. The cops assured us the house was clear and to please lock our doors and windows at all times. They think this person saw my parents leave and assumed the house was empty. I don't want to think that this person knew I was home alone. After some thought, my mother said, "Oh no, I don't think we locked the basement door." She just assumed since we lived in a quiet neighborhood we were safe, so she didn't really have to worry about it. Needless to say, after this night we all made sure to lock every door and window and make sure they stayed locked. They still leave me alone, but they let the next door neighbors know when they do, just in case. I still think about this night and it gives me nightmares. I'm 16 now and feel a little uneasy about being home alone, but I know I need to get over it. Please stay safe out there and always lock your doors. Always lock your doors, please. Sorry, that was a little aggressive, but I care about your safety too. You don't know who's lurking around your neighborhood. Period. Boo. The next story says, in the summer of 2012, when my mom was 30, she had the habit of jogging late at night on the track in the forest. Our town is small, considered safe, and it's a big tourist destination. The track in the forest is illuminated by streetlight, and it's visible in the front and back, but sides are full of trees, and it's completely black when it's dark. She was jogging one night as usual, but got scared without any reason and felt like she was being watched or followed. She continued jogging for a few more minutes, but heard something behind her and turned around to see what it was. She saw a pair of jeans in the middle of the track. Excuse me. She immediately ran away, got in the car, and went home. 2 days later, the body of a 31-year-old Mexican woman was found shallowly buried and covered with branches in the same forest. The murderer sliced her throat so bad he almost decapitated her. It was all over the news. He got caught, but he's out in 2027 because he pleaded not guilty. To this day, I believe my mom wasn't going to be the target, but the witness and collateral damage that night. If she hadn't ran away, I am so glad she trusted her sixth sense and got the fuck out of there. Oh my gosh, holy hell. Always listen to your gut. I've said that multiple times in videos. But please always listen to your gut. Always, if you feel uncomfortable for any reason, don't hesitate to skedaddle. This story is titled My Abuela's Encounter with La Llorona. I must read it, even though I've never seen the movie. I'm a big fan. This is my grandmother's story. She is from Puebla. It will be from her perspective. When I was a young girl, around 8 or 9, my mother always asked me to get water from the river outside. I didn't like it, but I listened to my mother and always did it. One night, it was very dark outside, so I begged my mother not to make me do it, but we were low on water and we had to prepare for a party. I walked outside, and as I was getting water, I heard a woman crying. I looked to my right and saw the back of this woman holding her hands and her face sobbing. I felt bad for her, so I put my bucket down and went up to her and said, "Señora, ¿estás bien?" She stopped and turned around and moved her hands from her face and gestured her hand to come towards her, with the other still covering her face. I stepped forward and moved her hand to reveal eyes with with no pupils, and a pale white face with yellow teeth. She screamed at me, and I ran, grabbing my bucket. I woke up the next morning thinking it was a nightmare and went into the kitchen. My mother was in there house, so I assumed they were all asleep. She turned to me and saw how scared I looked. She bent down and gave me a hug and whispered in my ear, "I saw her too." From then on, only my brothers got water from outside. The next story says, "This is not my story, it's my boyfriend's, but I thought it was creepy and I just have to share it." My boyfriend grew up in a small town in India. He lived in a small gated community and he was at the end of the street. Next to his house was a forest. One night he woke up, took his blanket and pillow to the couch, and turned on the TV and fell asleep. In his own words, he described what followed as an out-of-body experience, similar to a lucid dream. His consciousness seemed detached from his physical form, as if observing himself from a surreal vantage point. There he was, fixated on the television screen, which emitted nothing but static haze. No TV show, no movie, just static. Strangely enough, he found himself transfixed. He then woke up and felt a wash of fear and quickly walked down the hallway to get to his bedroom. At the end of the hall, outside of his bedroom, was a window. He looked out the window and saw a woman looking back at him standing at the edge of the forest. I asked him what she looked like. He said she was tall, had black hair, and was dressed in white. He said her mouth was hanging open. They stared at each other for a bit before he ran into his room. He fell back asleep, and in the morning he assumed it was all a dream, until he walked out of his room and saw his pillow and a blanket in the same position on the couch and the static channel on. Man, that gives me chills. Very creepy. The next story says, "When I was about 9 or 8, me and my siblings went to our babysitter's home for the night as my mom had to work the late shift. There was me and my siblings, the babysitter, and her 3 young grandchildren and a few dogs in the home. After we had gone to bed, I remember the babysitter running in, shouting fire. We were in a 3-story set of flats. On the top floor, and the front door was the only safe exit, but that was where the fire had started. We all managed to get out on the balcony and managed to get 2 dogs out, but the other had ran and hid under the bed and was the only casualty. I remember the firefighters using huge ladders and getting us all down to safety. Thankfully, after some oxygen, we were all cleared. Years later, my mom told me the daughters of the babysitter and the mother of their 3 children had an argument with a woman, and during the night she poured petrol through the letterbox, trailed it down to 2 sets of stairs across the landings, and then when she got to the bottom, she lit it up. I've always wondered if I should have died that night. One thing I've always wanted to know was I nearly murdered? Yeah, you were nearly fucking murdered. That's not even a question. The next story. This story isn't super scary, just a few weird things that happened to me one night that I can't explain. In early 2019, I was 21 and my little brother was 15, and he had just passed his driver's ed class. To celebrate his achievement, I took him to go to eat at Red Robin. Yum. Okay, sorry, that's not written there. And watch a movie at the movie theater. Before we went, I dropped my girlfriend at the time off at her friend's house and would pick her up after, since they were going to be drinking. So we dropped her off and went and had dinner and watched some movies about the escape room, and afterwards headed to go pick up my grandfriend. Excuse me, I'm thinking about my grandma because I'm gonna be going there after this. And then I tried to read girlfriend. My brain is everywhere. So let me reread that sentence. So we dropped her off and went and had dinner and watched some movie about escape rooms, and afterwards headed to go pick up my girlfriend. We were at her friend's house for a little while, just shooting in the shit, and by the time we left, I was getting close to my girlfriend's house to drop her off. It was kind of late, and she lived sort of in the country. There was no cell service at her house, just to give an idea of what kind of area she lived in. We were getting close. I felt my girlfriend put her hand on my leg, like she usually would, so I could hold her hand. When I went to grab her hand, all I felt was my jeans. I looked over, and she was curled up in a ball, sleeping and facing away from me. Shut up. Ghosts need love, too. I wasn't too spooked, just really puzzled. So I said to my brother, who was in the back seat, Pablo, did you touch my leg? I didn't realize he was sleeping, and he woke up asking if I could turn on the heater, turn the heater down, because it was hot. He's me. I hate heat. I asked him again, and he said no. And he got a little freaked out by the question. I told him it was probably just my aux cable. I knew damn well that my aux doesn't feel like that, but I also didn't want to freak him out, or give it too much thought. Once we got home, I was sitting on the couch, on my phone, and my brother was brushing his teeth when he said he saw a white figure go past the bathroom window. The window was roughly a 2-by-2-foot window at about head level on inside, but probably around 8 feet from the ground on the outside. I went into the bathroom to check it out and told him it could have been the reflection from his white shirt. I tried to see if I could see a reflection from my white shirt, but by moving my arm in front of the window, I couldn't. I told him not to worry about it, and we went to sleep. The next day, I woke up to drive him to school since I had the day off from work, and I remembered that I left our leftover boxes from Red Robin, yum, in the back seat of the car. I had taken home half a burger and several fries in my box. Oh, they wrote in parentheses, you know I'd be taking advantage of those bottomless steak fries, but is it worth it to reheat? Fries are like the worst thing to reheat. If anything, eat the fries while you're in the restaurant and then take home the burger that reheats well and eat that later. You see my logic? I'm just trying to help y'all out. Anyway, I unlocked my car and I picked up the box and it felt really light. I opened the box and there was only half a bitten fry in there. I was confused because I was pretty sure my brother didn't eat it because 1, he was sleeping. 2, he doesn't really like eating leftovers. I looked up and down my backseat because I thought maybe it fell at some point. I still asked my brother about it to make sure he didn't eat it, and he swore he didn't, and was a bit sketched out. Someone breaking into my car and eating my food isn't very likely because I lived in a rural area and nothing else was touching my car. Nothing else strange happened, and the leftover thing was kind of funny, but it just had me so confused and trying to think of a logical explanation along with the other 2 things that happened. The lady in the window. The lady in the window. Okay. My entire life, I've had something attached to me. I'm not sure if it's benevolent or a malevolent spirit, but I've never felt unsafe when she's around, but I also know that she's not protecting me. She followed me across the country, and even onto my first deployment when I was enlisted. I've never seen her head on. Never. Only out of my peripheral, or in reflections. So, I don't have a great description of her. The best I can make out is she's thin and petite with long, dark hair that reaches at least her hips, and I've never seen her face. This reminds me of Insidious, and I hate that for him. But on that note, we're gonna end the video. I hope you enjoyed these spooky stories, and that you are fast asleep right now, and that you're as comfy as bonnet wearing, neck pillow wearing, chilling on a pillow Pikachu right now. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe and to comment down below as you listen to my ashy hands make this noise. Just kidding, they're not ashy, but they're not moisturized either. If you are interested in sending me your Reddit-like spooky scary stories, make sure to email this email right here, which is also available in the description down below. The story does not have to be your own. Just let me know the details, please, and thank you. Okay. And lastly, if you're feeling generous and you want a tip, your favorite waitress, here's how you do that. This is my Cash App, and there is a tip jar link that you could also use. This, like the email, is available in the description down below. Anything is greatly appreciated, okay? I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Namaste.